Hey everyone, Ronald here, and in this video I want to talk to you about how some companies can abuse the technical interview process and how to avoid being a victim, particularly when it comes to take-home assignments. So stay tuned. Alright, first of all, I want to get started off by saying that it's okay, obviously, to test developers to get quality candidates. And in fact, you can get a good sense of the standards of a company by their interview process. I have a video about the different types of technical interviews they can conduct, and you can watch that. But today we're going to be talking about particularly one, and those are related to take-home assignments. Now, take-home assignments or take-home exams are when companies, as part of the interview process, give you some type of work to do at home. And in theory, it sounds practical, but in reality, you're spending time doing work that they're supposed to be paying you for. And honestly, in my opinion, it's a lazy way to test a candidate. And on top of that, it's subject to abuse, both by candidates and the company. It could be subject to abuse by a candidate because, let's be honest, a candidate behind the scenes can hire somebody else to do the code and then ask them, hey, all right, now explain to me everything that you just wrote so I could just talk it all up during the interview when I go back, all right? Obviously, that would be a shady candidate, but let's pretend that's not the case, all right? I'm more concerned with the abuse by the company. And there's a few ways a company can abuse this interview process. The first is just by asking the candidate to do a take-home exam that takes an unreasonable amount of time, like a half a day or up to a day, if not even more. And on top of that, and oftentimes, they can be dishonest about how long the exam will actually take. They'll probably say like, oh, it's only going to take like an hour or at the tops 2. And that puts you in an awkward position because if you disagree and you look at the assignment they gave you and you don't think it's going to take that short of a time, it puts you in a weird position because if you were to counter them, it just makes you look like, oh, you're unable to complete that code in the amount of time that other candidates can. Right? Now, the other way a company can abuse this assignment that they ask you to do is by simply not even checking your code when you're done because they found another candidate. And that happens. You know, sometimes they might find somebody else because you're usually not the only person that they're interviewing, and then they don't contact you to say, hey, by the way, stop working on this because we're going to be moving on with someone else, which is lame. And now you've just wasted some time. Now, yet another way, the third and the worst way a company could take advantage of you, and I never even thought about this until I heard that this happened to somebody else online, but they can have you complete an assignment with never having the intention to hire anyone. They just wanted someone to write some code for them for free. What? Yeah, that happens. Now, you're not going to find like a big company doing this, you know. It's going to be mostly like a small company that was too cheap to pay for developers, but it can happen. So you got to like watch out for yourself. So what do? If you find yourself in a situation where you're given a take-home assignment, here's what my recommendation is.
Show me the money.
Ask them to pay for the work that they want you to do and that you value your time. You know, you don't have to be demanding about it. You could just be cordial in the way that you ask. You could say, you know, I appreciate the assignment. I can understand the importance and value that it gives for someone to complete that. So you could, you know, get a sense of like how they code. But I also value my time, and I just have a rule for myself not to code for free. So I'm willing to do it, but I would just want to be compensated for it. And most likely if you say that, they'll probably come back and say, oh, it's not going to take that long, you know. But unless you actually really see the assignment and think that it's going to, you know, just take you an hour or under, anything over an hour, they should pay you for. Under that, then you could feel free to do it. But if it's going to take longer and they don't want to pay, then what I would suggest is giving them a couple of other options. One would be to do an on-screen coding test where they're asking you to complete, I don't know, write some code to communicate with an API. You could ask them, you know, hey, feel free to ask me anything that you want me to code live on screen so we could do it together, so you can get a sense of like how I think and how I code. You could do that. Many companies do that. That's normal. Or you can give them another option, which is to point them to some code that you have on GitHub, a project that you've done, so you could talk through the code that you've written and your thought process, and if they have questions, they can ask while you're talking through the project with them. Okay? And then after that, say, and once again, I want to say, I'm willing to do the take-home assignment. I would just need to be compensated for it, but without any compensation, I'm more than willing to show you some projects that I did and talk you through that, or have you ask me to do some code live for you on over Zoom or something to that effect, okay? And if they're willing to do the on-screen test with you or have you walk them through code, this makes them more accountable to put more effort into interviewing you, okay? And that's what we're getting at here. If they're not capable of asking questions during an on-screen live coding or while you're going through some code of some projects or apps that you built, that's not a good sign. Or if they just don't care about your requests, what makes you think that they'll care about you later on as an employee? I mean, the only way they probably actually really care is if you're a top performer that they desperately need, because if you were to leave, that would cripple them. First impressions count. If they're crappy to you during an interview process or very dismissive, they're going to be crappy and dismissive to you later on. So give them those two alternatives, the on-screen test or review of your projects or apps, and then iterate again that you're willing to do a take home for compensation, and then see how they respond. Now, having said all that, there are some exceptions. If you're new to programming, it's your first job, all right, well then consider this like doing the take-home assignment as you getting coffee for some job, working in the mailroom, doing that type of work just to get your foot in the door. But at the very least, ask them to give you some feedback if they don't accept you. You know, ask them if they're willing to give you feedback when you're done with the assignment. And if they agree and then they do not when you're done and they passed on you, then write a review on Glassdoor so that other people know, because that's shady. But at the very least, you should get some review. And really, that actually applies to anyone that does the assignment and they get passed on. You should try to get some feedback as to why they passed on. So it's a learning experience. It's the least they could do. The other exception, all right, if you're not a newbie, where I think it's okay to do the take-home assignment, is if they flew you into their town for the interview. So if they flew you in, whether you're like in their office or in your hotel, yeah, do it, because they are in a way kind of compensating for the trip. So it would be weird to like ask for compensation again, you know, to when they just flew you in. So yeah, in that case, just do the exam. So my final thoughts, all right, Having said everything that I just mentioned, I want to remind you of the flip side. If some company does not give any technical interview, or they're very light in their approach, that's a red flag, and you're probably going to be on a crappy team with other people that don't know how to develop that well because they weren't really tested. Probably. The probability is higher. So there should just be a balance with their approach in interviewing. My main reason for this video is for you to understand that you have value and you must be aware of it, because let's face it, if companies could pay you minimum wage for coding, they would. The only reason that they don't is because of how hard and difficult it is to find good quality candidates. So know your value and don't be pushed around in an interview by working hours for free, okay, just for a coding assignment. Believe you me, if other devs stand up and give pushback on these take-home assignments, they'll adjust. So that's it for me for now. Let me know what your experience has been. Have you ever been asked to do a take-home assignment? How long did it take? What did they ask you to build? And yeah, I'd like to hear what your experience has been or what your thoughts are, okay? So if you like that video, hit that like button. You know that definitely helps me out with the algorithm. And also, to check out more videos in the future, go ahead and subscribe, hitting that notification bell too. And to my left here, you can see a couple more videos that you could check out. So until then, I will see you guys in the next video.